The stars burned bright against the black canvas of space as Commander Jake Mitchell gripped the controls of his fighter craft. Through his cockpit window, he could see the planet Selvara below, its blue oceans and green continents marred by the orange glow of fires. Hundreds of enemy ships surrounded the planet like a swarm of angry insects, their weapons tearing through the atmosphere and striking cities below. Jake's jaw tightened. He had seen war before, but this was different. The Kragoth Empire had come to destroy an entire civilization, and they were doing it with brutal efficiency. The Veltherans were a peaceful people who had never prepared for war on this scale. Their defenses were crumbling and millions of innocent lives hung in the balance. "Delta Squadron, form up on my wing," Jake commanded into his radio. His voice was steady despite the chaos around him. 12 fighters moved into formation behind him, their pilots ready to follow him into hell if necessary. They were outnumbered 50-1, but that didn't matter. Earth Defense Force pilots weren't trained to count odds. They were trained to win. The battle had been raging for 3 hours. Jake's squadron had already destroyed 20 enemy ships, but for everyone they took down, 2 more appeared. The Kragoth fleet was massive, and their flagship sat at the center like a metal mountain in space. That ship was coordinating the entire attack, and Jake knew that if they could take it out, the rest of the fleet might fall apart. "Sir, we're getting distress calls from the surface," his co-pilot Lisa Martinez reported. "There are civilian transports trying to evacuate the capital, but they're sitting ducks down there." Jake looked at his scanner. The civilian ships were slow and unarmed. If the Kragoth fighters reached them, it would be a massacre. He made his decision in a heartbeat. Change of plans. "We're going down to cover those transports, but sir, the flagship..." "The transports first. Those are people down there, Lisa. Kids, families. We save them first." His squadron dove toward the planet, their engines screaming as they entered the atmosphere. The heat made Jake's cockpit glow red, but he pushed through it. Below, he could see the capital city of Selvara burning. Tall silver towers that had stood for thousands of years were collapsing. The streets were filled with people running for their lives. A dozen civilian transports were gathered at the main spaceport, loading as many refugees as they could hold. But Kragoth ground fighters were closing in fast, their weapons charging up for attack runs. Jake's fighter roared over the city at supersonic speed, his targeting computer locking onto the enemy craft. "Weapons free. Take them down." The sky erupted in fire and light. Jake's missiles struck 3 Kragoth fighters before they knew what hit them. His squadron spread out, creating a defensive perimeter around the spaceport. Every few seconds, another enemy ship would appear, and every time Jake or one of his pilots would shoot it down. But there were too many. For every enemy they destroyed, more kept coming. Jake's fuel was running low and his ammunition counter was dropping fast. One of his pilots, Danny Chen, took a hit and had to eject. Jake watched the parachute deploy, hoping Danny would make it to the ground safely. "This is Transport 7. We're loaded and ready to launch." "Copy that. 7, get those people out of here." One by one, the civilian transports lifted off. They were clumsy and slow, built for comfort, not speed. The Kragoth fighters saw them and changed course to intercept. Jake's heart pounded. Those transports wouldn't stand a chance. All fighters knew objective. "We draw their fire. Make yourselves targets." Jake pulled his fighter into a steep climb, flying directly at the enemy formation. His weapons blazed, and he twisted and turned through the incoming fire. Explosions erupted around his cockpit, so close he could feel the heat. Behind him, the transports were gaining altitude, climbing toward the safety of space. Then his warning system screamed. A missile was locked onto him, and he had no countermeasures left. Jake yanked the controls hard, trying to evade, but the missile was too fast. It struck his left engine, and the entire fighter shook violently. "Engine 1 is gone. I'm losing altitude. Jake, eject!" Lisa shouted. "Not yet. Those transports aren't clear." Smoke poured from his fighter as it spiraled downward. Jake fought the controls, trying to keep the craft stable. Through the chaos, he saw the Kragoth flagship overhead. It was charging its main weapon, a massive cannon that could destroy the entire spaceport in one shot. If it fired, everyone still on the ground would die. Jake looked at his fuel gauge. He had just enough for one last maneuver. His targeting computer struggled to lock onto the flagship through all the interference, but finally, it beeped. "Target acquired." "This is gonna hurt," Jake muttered. He redirected all remaining power to his engines and aimed his crippled fighter directly at the flagship's weapon port. The distance closed rapidly. His second engine started to fail, but he was already committed. The flagship's point defense guns opened fire, trying to shoot him down, but he weaved through the barrage like a dancer. "Jake, what are you doing?" Lisa screamed through the radio. "Saving people." At the last second, Jake fired every remaining missile he had and ejected from his fighter. The cockpit exploded away from the craft, and he felt the brutal force of the ejection slam him into his seat. Below, his fighter, now a flaming missile itself, struck the flagship's main weapon just as his missiles hit. The explosion was enormous. The flagship's weapon overloaded, and a chain reaction tore through the entire front section of the massive ship. The flagship began to list to one side, fires erupting across its hull. The coordinated Kragoth attack suddenly fell apart as the enemy fleet lost its command center. Jake's parachute deployed, and he drifted down toward the burning city. His whole body ached from the ejection, and he could barely think straight. But through the smoke and chaos, he saw the civilian transports escaping into space. They were safe. He hit the ground hard in the middle of a destroyed plaza. His parachute dragged him several feet before he managed to detach it. Jake struggled to his feet, his flight suit torn and bloody. Around him, the city was in ruins. Buildings burned, and the sound of distant fighting echoed through the streets. His radio crackled. "This is anyone from Delta Squadron. Come in. This is Jake. I'm on the ground in the capital. What's the situation up there?" "The Kragoth fleet is retreating." "You did it, sir. You stopped them." Jake allowed himself a moment of relief, but only a moment. He could hear screams nearby. People were still in danger. He started running toward the sound, ignoring the pain in his ribs. He came to a large building with a red medical symbol on it. A hospital. The front entrance was blocked by rubble, and smoke poured from the windows. Through the broken glass, he could see people trapped inside, including many who couldn't walk on their own. Kragoth ground soldiers were advancing down the street toward the hospital. They hadn't left with their fleet. These were the ones determined to kill as many Veltherans as possible before they died. Jake still had his sidearm. He checked the magazine. 20 rounds. Not nearly enough, but it would have to do. He took a position behind a destroyed vehicle and opened fire. The first Kragoth soldier went down. Then the second. The others took cover and returned fire. Energy bolts sizzled through the air around Jake, melting chunks of metal and concrete. For 6 hours, Jake held that position. Every time the Kragoth soldiers tried to advance, he drove them back. He used every trick he knew, changing positions, using the rubble for cover, making every shot count. When he ran out of ammunition for his pistol, he picked up a Kragoth weapon from a fallen soldier and kept fighting. Medical staff inside the hospital managed to evacuate the patients through a back entrance. Jake saw them leading wounded Veltherans to safety, some being carried, others limping on their own. He had to hold just a little longer. His vision was blurring from exhaustion and blood loss. He had been hit twice, once in the shoulder and once in the leg, but the adrenaline kept him moving. The Kragoth soldiers were getting smarter, flanking him, surrounding his position. He was running out of time and options. Then he heard the beautiful sound of human engines overhead. Earth Defense Force dropships descended from the sky, and soldiers in powered armor hit the ground running. They tore through the Kragoth forces like a hurricane, their weapons making short work of the enemy soldiers. A medic reached Jake just as his legs gave out. "I got you, Commander. You're going to be okay. The hospital, the people, they're safe. You saved them all." Jake's eyes closed. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was the medic calling for emergency evacuation. Far above the planet, in one of the refugee ships that Jake had saved, Princess Lyria sat in a small cabin watching the news feeds. Her elegant features were marked by exhaustion and grief. Her world had been devastated. Her people were scattered across dozens of ships, homeless and terrified, but they were alive. Somehow, impossibly, they were alive. The news showed footage of the battle. A single human fighter craft diving through impossible fire to protect the evacuation ships. The same fighter ramming the Kragoth flagship, destroying its main weapon. The pilots were calling him insane. The reporters were calling him a hero. Then the footage switched to ground cameras. A human soldier in a torn. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Silvara. The war with the Kragoth Empire continued across the galaxy, but the alliance between Earth and the Veltheran Confederacy had grown stronger with each passing day. Together, the two civilizations were holding the line against the enemy advance. Jake Mitchell stood in his apartment on Luna Station, staring at the dress uniform hanging in his closet. The blue fabric was covered in medals and ribbons, more than he had ever expected to earn in his lifetime. Tomorrow he would travel to Selvara for a formal ceremony, where both governments would honor him for his actions during the battle. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a soldier who had done his job. 19 good pilots from his squadron had died that day. Danny Chen had survived his ejection but would never fly again. Every time Jake closed his eyes, he saw their faces. His door chimed. Jake opened it to find his commanding officer, Admiral Patricia Hayes, standing in the hallway with an unusual expression on her face. "Permission to enter, Commander?" "Of course, Admiral." Patricia walked in and looked around the sparse apartment. "You know, for someone who's become the most famous pilot in 2 solar systems, you live pretty simply. I'm not really home much. That's about to change. Jake, you're being promoted. Captain effective immediately. And after the ceremony on Selvara, you'll be taking command of the defense station at the border." Jake blinked. "Captain? Ma'am, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Ready or not, you've earned it. But that's not why I'm here." Patricia's expression grew more serious. "The Veltheran government has requested that Princess Lyria personally escort you to the ceremony." She insisted on it, actually. Refused to take no for an answer. "The princess? Why would she?" "Apparently you made quite an impression. She's been following your recovery closely. The transport leaves tomorrow at 0800 hours. After Patricia left, Jake sat on his bed thinking about the princess. He had seen her on news broadcasts, of course. Everyone had. She was beautiful, elegant, and had become the face of Veltheran recovery efforts. She spoke passionately about rebuilding her world and strengthening the alliance with Earth. But why would she want to personally escort him? It seemed like something beyond normal diplomatic protocol. The next morning, Jake arrived at the docking bay in his dress uniform, carrying a small bag with his personal belongings. The Veltheran ship waiting for him was nothing like the military craft he was used to. It was elegant and flowing, like a sculpture that happened to fly through space. The airlock opened and Princess Lyria herself stood waiting. Jake's breath caught. Pictures didn't do her justice. She was tall and graceful, with silver hair that seemed to shimmer and eyes that were the color of deep space. She wore flowing robes in shades of blue and silver that moved like water. "Commander Mitchell," she said, her voice soft but clear, "it is an honor to finally meet you." Jake saluted instinctively, then felt foolish. She was royalty, not a military officer. "Your Highness." "The honor is mine." She smiled, and something about that smile made Jake's heart skip. "Please come aboard. We have a long journey ahead of us." The ship departed Luna Station smoothly. Lyria showed Jake to his quarters, which were far more luxurious than anything he had experienced before. Then she invited him to join her for dinner in the ship's observation deck. They sat across from each other at a small table, with the stars spreading out in all directions around them. The food was Veltheran, delicate and flavored with spices Jake had never tasted before. At first, the conversation was formal and polite. They talked about the war, the alliance, the rebuilding efforts on Selvara. But as the evening went on, something shifted. The formality began to fade, replaced by something more comfortable, more natural. "Tell me about yourself, Commander," Lyria said. "Not the hero from the news reports. The real person," Jake hesitated. "There's not much to tell. I grew up in Seattle. My mom was a scientist, a xenobiologist. She worked with the early alien contact programs. My dad was a teacher. I always loved flying, so I joined the Defense Force as soon as I was old enough." "Seattle," Lyria repeated, her eyes distant. "I've been there." "Really?" "Most Veltherans prefer the warmer climates when they visit Earth." "It was a long time ago. I was just a child." 10 years old? She looked at Jake more closely now, studying his face. "Your mother was a xenobiologist?" "Yeah, she was part of the exchange program back in the day. We used to host visiting scientists and students." Jake smiled at the memory. "One summer when I was about 10, we had a Veltharan exchange student stay with us for 3 months. First time I ever met someone from another world. We became really good friends that summer." Lyria's hand trembled slightly as she set down her glass. "What was her name?" "I don't... Wait." Jake's eyes widened as the memory came flooding back. Her name was Lyria. The silence that followed felt like it stretched forever. They stared at each other across the table, both of them seeing past the uniforms and titles to the children they had once been. "The hideout in the woods," Lyria whispered. "We built it together out of fallen branches and old tarps. The beach at Alki Point, Jake added, his voice barely audible. You had never seen an ocean before. You were scared of the waves at first, but you held my hand and walked in with me. You taught me constellation patterns from your world. We would lie on the grass at night and you would tell me stories about the stars. You taught me to ride a bicycle. I fell so many times, but you never laughed at me. They both stood at the same time, moving around the table toward each other. Lyria reached out and touched Jake's face gently, as if confirming he was real. I looked for you, she said, tears forming in her eyes. When I got older, I tried to find information about you, but there are billions of humans and I only remembered your first name and the city. I thought I would never see you again. I never forgot you, Jake said. That summer changed my life. You showed me that the universe was so much bigger than I thought. You're the reason I became a pilot. I wanted to see the stars you told me about, and I became a diplomat because of you. You showed me that humans and Veltherans could be friends, real friends, that we weren't so different. They embraced, and for a moment they were just Jake and Lyria again, two friends reunited after 20 years apart. The weight of their positions and the war and everything else faded away. When they finally separated, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. I can't believe it's you, Lyria said. Of all the humans in the galaxy, the one who saved my world was you. Maybe it wasn't a coincidence, Jake said. Maybe the universe knew what it was doing. For the rest of the journey, they talked like they had all those years ago. They shared stories about what had happened in the 20 years since that summer. Jake told her about joining the Defense Force, his first missions, the friends he had made and lost. Lyria told him about her education, her diplomatic training, the pressure of being a princess in a time of war. Do you remember the promise we made? Lyria asked as they sat watching the stars together. We promised we would never forget each other. We kept that promise. Even when we didn't remember the details, something remained. She looked at him seriously. I need to tell you something, Jake. When I saw the footage of the battle before I knew it was you, something about that pilot felt familiar. I couldn't explain it. Now I understand. Part of me recognized you even after all these years. I felt it too when we first met on the station. I couldn't place it, but you seemed familiar. What does this mean? Lyria asked quietly. This connection between us. The fact that you saved my world. That we found each other again. Jake didn't have an answer. He only knew that sitting here with Lyria felt right in a way nothing else ever had. As they approached Selvarra, Jake could see the scars of battle still visible on the planet's surface. But he could also see signs of recovery, new buildings rising from the ruins, ships coming and going in organized traffic patterns, life returning. Thank you, Lyria said softly, for saving my world, for saving my people, for being the person I always believed you would become. You don't need to thank me. I was just doing what you would have done. Maybe that's why we were friends. We always understood each other. The ship entered Selvarra's atmosphere and Jake prepared himself for the ceremony ahead. But his mind wasn't on the medals or the speeches. He was thinking about the little girl who had taught him about the stars, and the woman she had become. He was thinking about how fate had brought them together again in the middle of a war, against impossible odds. He was thinking about what might happen next. As they descended toward the capital, Lyria reached over and took his hand. Whatever comes next, I'm glad you're here. Me too, Jake said. Neither of them knew that their reunion was about to become public knowledge, or that it would create complications neither of them were prepared for. They didn't know that the Kragoth Empire was watching and planning. They didn't know that their childhood friendship was about to be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. All they knew was that they had found each other again, and that felt like a miracle. The ship touched down on the landing platform in the heart of the rebuilt capital. Outside, thousands of Veltharans waited to see the human hero. The news of Jake and Lyria's childhood connection spread across both worlds within hours. The ceremony on Selvarra had gone beautifully, with Jake receiving the highest honors the Veltharan Confederacy could bestow. But afterward, during a pressing conference, a reporter had asked how Jake and the princess seemed so comfortable with each other. Lyria had answered honestly, explaining that they had been childhood friends. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On Earth, the story was celebrated as a beautiful coincidence, proof that the bonds between humans and Veltharans went deeper than politics. News networks ran features about the exchange program that had brought young Lyria to Earth. They interviewed Jake's mother, who still had pictures from that summer 20 years ago. On Selvarra, the reaction was more mixed. Many Veltharans saw it as a sign of destiny, evidence that Jake's heroism was guided by fate, but others were less enthusiastic. Some questioned whether Jake's actions had been influenced by his personal connection to the princess. Conservative members of the Veltharan Council suggested that Lyria was showing favoritism that could damage diplomatic relations. In the war room of a Kragoth command ship, military intelligence officers watched the news feeds with great interest. Their supreme commander, General Vorgath, studied the images of Jake and Lyria together. This connection between the human and the princess, Vorgath said in his harsh, guttural language, it is a weakness we can exploit. How, General? One of his officers asked. The alliance between the humans and Veltharans is still young. It is built on mutual need, not deep trust. If we can create doubt about their motivations, if we can make each side question the other's true intentions, the alliance will crack. Vorgath pointed at the screen. We will make them believe that this alliance is built on personal favoritism, not strategic necessity. We will turn their symbol of unity into a symbol of corruption. The Kragoth propaganda machine began its work. Carefully crafted messages appeared on neutral worlds, suggesting that Earth had only helped Selvarra because of Jake's personal connection to the princess. Other messages implied that Lyria was using her position to advance her own romantic interests rather than her people's needs. The lies were subtle and mixed with just enough truth to seem believable. Back on Earth, Jake returned to his duties. He had accepted the promotion to captain and was preparing to take command of the border defense station. But his mind kept returning to Selvarra, to Lyria. They communicated regularly through secure channels. Video calls that started as official reports about military coordination, but always ended with them talking about everything else. They shared memories from their childhood, talked about their hopes for the future, supported each other through difficult days. Jake found himself thinking about her constantly. The way she smiled, the sound of her voice, the fierce intelligence in her eyes when she discussed strategy. She wasn't just his childhood friend anymore. She had become someone he cared about deeply, in ways that both thrilled and terrified him. Lyria felt the same confusion. Her duties as princess were overwhelming. She spent her days coordinating relief efforts, attending diplomatic meetings, and preparing for her eventual role as queen. But every night, she looked forward to those calls with Jake. He was the one person who saw her as just Lyria, not a princess or a symbol or a political figure. 4 weeks after the ceremony, Lyria traveled to Harmony Point, a neutral space station where a major diplomatic summit was being held. Representatives from dozens of worlds were gathering to discuss the Kragoth threat and coordinate their defenses. Jake's new posting was near Harmony Point, and they had arranged to meet in person. When Jake arrived at the station, he found Lyria in a private conference room, reviewing documents. She looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her normally perfect posture was slumped with fatigue. You look like you haven't slept in a week, Jake said gently. Closer to 2 weeks, Lyria admitted. She stood and embraced him, holding on longer than was probably appropriate. I've missed you. I've missed you too. They sat together, and Lyria told him about the pressures she was facing. The Council of Elders was pushing her to make decisions about her future. Veltharan tradition required that she marry and produce an heir before she could take the throne. But more than that, they were expressing concerns about her relationship with Jake. They say I'm becoming too close to you, Lyria said quietly. They worry that it will compromise my judgment. Some of them want me to stop all personal contact with you. Jake felt a cold weight in his stomach. What did you tell them? I told them that you are my friend and I will not abandon a friend because of political pressure. But Jake, they're right about some things. Veltharan royal tradition is very specific. Any potential partner must undergo trials to prove their worth. They must demonstrate strength, wisdom, and commitment to our people. Many candidates have died in these trials. Are you saying they would expect me to? I don't know what I'm saying. Lyria's frustration was clear. I don't even know what we are to each other. We're friends, we've always been friends, but I feel something more, and I think you do too. But how can we explore that when I have responsibilities to my entire civilization, when you have your own duties to Earth? Before Jake could respond, Admiral Hayes contacted him through his communicator. Captain Mitchell, we need you in the command center immediately. There's a situation developing. Jake and Lyria rushed to the command center together. The main display showed a portion of the station in chaos. Kragoth saboteurs had infiltrated Harmony Point. They were targeting life support systems and had already set off several explosions. All security forces are responding, the station commander reported. But we have reports of civilian casualties in sectors 7 through 12. Jake turned to Lyria. You need to get to a secure location. No. My people are on this station. I won't hide while they're in danger. Lyria, don't argue with me, Jake. We're wasting time. They moved together through the chaotic corridors. Station security was overwhelmed, and smoke filled the hallways. Jake's military training took over. He led Lyria and a group of civilians toward the emergency shelters, his weapon drawn and ready. They encountered a group of Kragoth saboteurs in Sector 9. The enemy soldiers opened fire immediately. Jake pushed Lyria behind cover and returned fire, taking down 2 of the attackers. But there were 6 more, and they were heavily armed. Stay down, Jake ordered, moving to flank the enemy position. But Lyria wasn't the type to hide. She had been trained in combat, just like all members of the Veltharan royal family. She drew her own weapon and provided covering fire, allowing Jake to advance. Together they fought with an instinctive coordination that surprised them both. They moved as one unit, each anticipating the other's actions. When Jake moved left, Lyria covered right. When she advanced, he protected her. It was like their minds were connected, each knowing what the other would do before they did it. The battle was intense but brief. The Kragoth saboteurs were well trained, but they hadn't expected coordinated resistance from a human soldier and a Veltharan princess. Within minutes, all 6 were down. Jake checked on Lyria. Are you hurt? I'm fine. You? I'm okay. He smiled despite the situation. You're pretty good in a fight. Royal training. We're not just pretty faces. They continued helping civilians reach safety, working alongside station security to contain the sabotage. For 3 hours they fought side by side through the smoke and chaos. Every time Jake turned around, Lyria was there. Every time she was in danger, Jake was there to protect her. When the situation was finally under control and the Kragoth saboteurs were either dead or captured, Jake and Lyria found themselves alone in an empty corridor. They were both covered in soot and exhausted, but they were alive. That was terrifying, Lyria said. You didn't seem terrified. You were amazing. So were you. She looked at him seriously. We work well together. Yeah, we do. The moment hung between them, charged with everything they weren't saying. Then Lyria stepped forward and kissed him. It was brief and sweet and full of emotion that neither of them could put into words. When they pulled apart, Jake touched his forehead to hers. We need to talk about this. I know, but not right now. Right now, I just want to be glad we're both alive. The next day, the investigation into the attack revealed disturbing information. The Kragoth sabotage had been a test, a probe to identify weaknesses in station security. But more importantly, intelligence officers discovered Kragoth propaganda that had been spreading through neutral worlds. The messages were designed to undermine the human Veltharan alliance by creating suspicion about Jake and Lyria's relationship. Admiral Hayes showed Jake some of the propaganda during a private briefing. They're trying to use your friendship against us. They want both sides to question the alliance. What do they suggest I do? Some people think you and the princess should avoid public contact. Keep your relationship strictly professional. And what do you think? Hayes smiled slightly. I think the Kragoth are afraid. They saw what you two did yesterday fighting together. They know that if humans and Veltharans can work together that well, they don't stand a chance. So they're trying to break you apart before you become too strong. 2 months had passed since Harmony Point. Jake had settled into his command at the Border Defense Station, a massive structure that monitored Kragoth movements along the frontier. His days were filled with patrol schedules, training exercises, and strategic planning. His nights were filled with thoughts of Lyria. They still spoke regularly, though never as often as either of them wanted. Lyria was drowning in responsibilities on Silvara. She attended endless council meetings, oversaw reconstruction projects, and played her role as the symbol of Veltharan resilience. In every public appearance, she smiled and spoke of hope, but Jake could see the exhaustion in her eyes during their private calls. "How are you really doing?" he asked during one of their late-night conversations. "Tired," she admitted. "The council is pushing harder about marriage. They've presented me with 3 suitable candidates, all from noble families. All perfectly qualified." Jake felt a twist in his stomach. And I keep making excuses to delay meeting them. It's not fair to anyone, especially you. I'm holding on to something that might never be possible. Don't say that. Jake, be realistic. I'm going to be queen. You're an Earth military officer. How could we ever? An alarm cut her off. On Jake's end, red lights began flashing throughout the command center. His communications officer burst into his office. "Captain, we have an emergency transmission from Silvara. The Kragoth fleet is back, and it's 3 times the size of the first attack." Jake's blood ran cold. On the screen, he saw Lyria's face go pale as she received the same information. "I have to go," she said. "Wait, Lyria. My people need me." Her voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Goodbye, Jake." The screen went dark. Jake was already moving, shouting orders to his crew. "All ships prepare for immediate departure. Set course for Silvara, maximum speed." His executive officer looked uncertain. "Sir, we haven't received orders from Earth Command. We're supposed to hold this position. I'm not leaving Silvara defenseless. Get us moving now." The journey to Silvara took 18 hours at maximum speed. During that time, Jake received fragmentary reports about the battle. The Kragoth fleet had emerged from deep space with overwhelming numbers. They had learned from their first defeat and come prepared. This time, they weren't just attacking the capital. They were hitting targets all across the planet simultaneously. The Veltharan defense fleet was fighting desperately, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Earth forces were responding, but most were too far away to help in time. Jake's small fleet from the border station was among the first reinforcements to arrive. As they entered the Silvara system, Jake's sensors painted a nightmare picture. Hundreds of Kragoth ships surrounded the planet. The space above Silvara was a storm of fire and death. Dozens of ships on both sides were already destroyed, their wreckage floating like a graveyard in orbit. "This is Captain Mitchell to all Earth and Veltharan forces. We're here to help. Send us the coordinates where you need us most." The response came from a Veltharan commander whose voice was strained with exhaustion. "Captain Mitchell, thank the stars. The Kragoth have deployed a new weapon, a siege cannon on a massive platform. It's in geosynchronous orbit above the capital. If it fires, it will crack the planet's crust. They've given us 1 hour to surrender, or they'll destroy Silvara completely." Jake's tactical mind raced through options. The siege platform would be heavily defended. A frontal assault would be suicide. But if they didn't stop it, millions would die. "Where is Princess Lyria?" Jake asked. "She's in the orbital command station coordinating the defense. But Captain, she's ordered us not to attempt an assault on the siege platform. She says the risk is too great." "Connect me to her." Lyria's face appeared on his screen. She was in a military command center, surrounded by displays showing the battle. Her expression was a mixture of relief and worry when she saw him. "Jake, you shouldn't be here. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is. Tell me about this siege weapon." "It's massive, and it's protected by their best ships. Any attack will be a one-way trip. I won't ask people to die on a suicide mission. What if I told you I have a way to stop it?" "Jake, no. I know what you're thinking, and I won't let you do it again. You almost died last time, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Lyria, this is what I do. This is what I'm good at. Trust me." She stared at him through the screen, and he could see the conflict in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. "What do you need?" "I need you to coordinate with me. My ships will create a diversion, but I'm going to need someone managing the battlefield, moving forces to cover my approach. Someone who knows Kragoth tactics and can anticipate their responses. You want me to be your tactical coordinator? I want you to be my partner. Like at Harmony Point, we work well together, remember? A small smile crossed her face despite the dire situation. I remember. Okay, Jake, let's do this. Over the next 30 minutes, Jake and Lyria planned their strategy. His ships would engage the Kragoth forces around the siege platform, drawing their attention. Meanwhile, Jake would lead a small strike team and fast attack craft to penetrate the platform's defenses. Once inside, they would sabotage the weapon from within. The siege platform has 6 main defense batteries, Lyria explained, pulling up schematics on her display. If you approach from Vector 723, there's a slight gap in their coverage. But you'll only have a 30-second window. 30 seconds is plenty, Jake said with more confidence than he felt. Jake, Lyria said quietly, please come back, I will. I promise, the battle plan was set. Jake's fleet moved into position, and he transferred to a small attack craft with 5 other pilots. They were the best in his squadron, volunteers who knew the risks. All units, this is Princess Lyria. I have command of the tactical network. Follow my instructions precisely and we can win this. Jake's attack craft launched, skimming along the edge of the battle. Lyria's voice was in his ear, calm and focused, guiding him through the chaos. She directed Veltharan ships to create openings, called out enemy positions before they could target him, and managed the entire battlefield like a master conductor leading an orchestra. Enemy fighters closing from your 3 o'clock, Lyria warned. Veltharan Squadron Delta, intercept. A group of Veltharan ships swept in, engaging the enemy fighters before they could reach Jake's position. The coordination was perfect. Jake felt a surge of admiration for Lyria's tactical brilliance. Approaching the gap in their defenses, Jake reported. Everyone ready? His team confirmed. On Lyria's mark, they accelerated toward the siege platform. Enemy fire erupted around them, but they were moving too fast and too unpredictably to hit. Jake counted down the seconds, 20, 15, 10. Now, Jake, go now. They shot through the gap in the defenses and slammed against the siege platform's hull. Magnetic clamps engaged, holding them in place. Jake and his team quickly exited their craft and used cutting torches to breach the hull. Inside the platform, they found themselves in a massive facility. The siege weapon took up most of the structure, a cannon so large it seemed impossible that it could exist. Kragoth soldiers were everywhere. Lyria, we're in. What's our route to the power core? Uploading the path to your display now. Jake, they know you're inside. They're sending all available troops to stop you. The fight through the platform was brutal. Jake's team moved fast, using explosives and their superior training to cut through resistance. But they were taking casualties. One pilot went down, then another. By the time they reached the power core, only Jake and 2 others remained. The power core was a massive chamber filled with energy conduits and control systems. Jake immediately started setting charges on the critical systems. But the platform's commander, a massive Kragoth warrior named Thalgren, entered the chamber with a squad of elite guards. Lyria, we've got a problem, Jake said, drawing his weapon. I see them on thermal. Jake, that's War Master Thalgren. He's never been defeated in combat. There's a first time for everything. The battle was fierce. Jake's remaining team members fell quickly, leaving him alone against Thalgren and his guards. Jake fought with everything he had, using the environment, the narrow corridors, every trick he knew. He managed to take down the guards, but Thalgren seemed unstoppable. The Kragoth War Master was huge, fast, and incredibly skilled. He drove Jake back step by step toward the edge of the chamber. Jake's weapon was running out of ammunition. He was bleeding from multiple wounds. This was it. He was going to die here. Then Lyria's voice came through his communicator. Jake, the charges. The sequence is complete. Just activate them. But I won't have time to escape. Yes, you will. Trust me. Jake dodged another attack from Thalgren and dove for the control panel. His fingers flew across the controls, activating the explosive sequence. Thalgren roared and charged at him, but Jake rolled away at the last second. Charges armed. 30 seconds to detonation. Jake, get to the western airlock. Now, he ran. Thalgren pursued, but the explosions were already starting. Sections of the power core began to fail, sending cascades of energy through the chamber. Jake reached the western airlock just as Lyria's voice came through again. Veltharan rescue craft is at your position. Jump! Jake hit the airlock controls and leaped into space. For a terrifying. The Kragoth retreat was complete within 12 hours. Their fleet scattered across the system, many ships fleeing into deep space while others tried to regroup. But the combined Earth-Veltharan forces pursued them relentlessly. This time, there would be no chance for the enemy to recover and attack again. Jake spent those 12 hours in the medical bay of the command station, getting his wounds treated. Nothing was life-threatening, but he had burns, cuts, and 3 cracked ribs. The doctor, an elderly Veltheran named Corin, patched him up while shaking his head. "You humans are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish," Corin said. "Sometimes I think both." Lyria visited him as soon as the doctors allowed it. She looked exhausted but relieved. When she entered the room, Jake tried to stand at attention despite his injuries. "Don't you dare," she said, gently pushing him back down. "You've done enough for one day. Is the planet secure?" "Yes, the ground forces surrendered once their fleet ran. We're processing prisoners and beginning damage assessment, but the capital is safe. The whole planet is safe because of you." "Because of us," Jake corrected again. "Your tactical coordination was perfect. I've never worked with anyone who understood battlefield flow like you do." Lyria sat beside his bed, taking his hand. "We do work well together." The weight of unspoken words hung between them. So much had happened in the past day. So much had changed. But before they could talk about it, King Verandal himself entered the medical bay. Jake immediately tried to stand, but the king waved him down. Verandal was tall and regal, with silver hair and eyes that had seen centuries of history. He studied Jake for a long moment before speaking. "Captain Mitchell, you have saved my world twice now. My people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Your Majesty, I was just doing my duty. Your duty is to Earth, not to Silvara. Yet here you are." Verandal glanced at his daughter, then back to Jake. "I am not blind, Captain. I see what is growing between you and my daughter. The question is, what do we do about it?" Lyria stood. "Father, this isn't the time. When will be the time? The galaxy is watching. The media on both our worlds won't stop talking about you two. Every action you take together is analyzed and debated. We cannot ignore this situation any longer. What do you suggest, Your Majesty?" Jake asked. Verandal was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Veltheran tradition is ancient and strict. Members of the royal family must marry carefully. Any potential consort must undergo trials to prove their worth. These trials test strength, wisdom, and dedication to our people. Many candidates have failed. Some have died. Father, you can't be suggesting— I'm suggesting nothing yet. I am simply explaining the reality of our situation." Verandal looked at Jake. "If you were to pursue a relationship with my daughter, these trials would be required. They are not easy, and they are not negotiable." "I would undergo any trial necessary," Jake said without hesitation, "even if it meant leaving your military career. Your life on Earth? Your people?" Jake opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He hadn't thought that far ahead. His career was everything to him. It was his identity, his purpose. Seeing his hesitation, Verandal nodded. "As I thought. This is not a simple choice, Captain. And there is another option." He turned to his daughter. "Lyria, you could choose to renounce your claim to the throne. You could pursue a life with Captain Mitchell without the burden of royal duty." "No," Lyria said immediately. "My people need me. We're still rebuilding. We're still vulnerable. I can't abandon them." "Then you both face an impossible choice," Verandal said sadly. "Captain Mitchell cannot be with you without giving up everything he is. And you cannot be with him without abandoning your responsibilities. I am giving you 1 week to decide. After that, the council will require a formal answer." The king left, and Jake and Lyria sat in heavy silence. Finally, Jake spoke. "Maybe he's right. Maybe we've been fooling ourselves thinking this could work." "Don't say that, Lyria, be honest. What kind of life would we have? You're going to be queen. I'm a soldier. We'd be pulled in different directions constantly, never having a real chance to just be together. So what are you saying? That we should just give up?" "I'm saying maybe we need to accept reality." Lyria stood, and Jake could see tears forming in her eyes. "After everything we've been through? After finding each other again against all odds? You want to just walk away?" "I don't want to, but I don't see another option." "Then you're not looking hard enough." She walked to the door, then paused. "The Jake I knew as a child never gave up on anything. He taught me to keep trying even when things seemed impossible." "Where is that person now?" She left, and Jake lay back in the medical bed staring at the ceiling. His ribs hurt. His burns hurt. But none of that compared to the pain in his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. Over the next few days, Jake recovered physically, while struggling mentally. He walked through the recovering capital of Silvara. seeing the damage that had been done and the rebuilding that was happening. Everywhere he went, Velthrans thanked him. Children asked for his autograph. People called him a hero, but he didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a coward who couldn't figure out how to fight for the person he cared about most. On the fourth day, Admiral Hayes arrived on Selvarra with a fleet of Earth ships. She found Jake sitting in a memorial garden that had been built to honor those who died in the first attack. "I heard about your conversation with the king," she said, sitting beside him. "News travels fast. The promotion board met. They want to make you Admiral, Jake, youngest in Earth Defense Force history. You'd be in charge of the entire Outer Rim fleet. It's everything you've worked for." Jake should have felt excited. Instead, he felt numb. "That's quite an honor. You don't sound happy about it. I don't know what I am anymore. A week ago, I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted. Now everything is confused." Hayes was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you a story? When I was young, I was engaged to a man I loved very much. He was a scientist, brilliant and kind, but he wanted a simple life. A house, kids, stability, and I wanted the stars. I wanted adventure and command. So I chose my career. I left him. Do you regret it? Every day. But I also know I couldn't have been happy living his life, and he couldn't have been happy living mine. Some choices don't have right answers, Jake. They just have consequences we have to live with." After Hayes left, Jake walked to the place he had been avoiding, the secret hideout in the woods behind his childhood home, or rather the ruins of it. The little fort he and Lyria had built was barely standing, weathered by 20 years and the recent battle damage. He found Lyria already there, sitting among the broken branches and torn tarps. She looked up when he approached, and he could see she had been crying. "I've been thinking about what you said," Jake started. "About the person I used to be. The kid who never gave up. Jake, I shouldn't have said that. This situation is impossible. I understand if you let me finish." He sat beside her. "That kid who built this fort with you, he believed in impossible things. He believed that a human boy and an alien girl could be friends even though their worlds were light years apart. He believed that kindness mattered more than differences. He believed in promises that seemed silly to everyone else." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'll take the trials. I'll do whatever it takes, because I'd rather spend my life trying to be worthy of you than spend it wondering what might have been." Lyria grabbed his hand. "But your career?" "Your life on Earth. My career was about serving and protecting. I can do that anywhere. And you taught me that home isn't a place. It's the people who matter to you. You're my home, Lyria. You always have been. The trials are dangerous. You could die. Then I'll die trying, but I don't think I will. Because I'll have you there cheering me on, just like you did when you taught me to see the universe differently." They held each other in the ruins of their childhood fort, and for the first time in days, both of them felt hope. The next day, they presented their decision to King Verandal and the council. Jake would remain on Selvarra and begin the traditional trials. Lyria would continue her preparations to eventually lead her people, and together, they would work to strengthen the alliance between their worlds. The announcement created a media sensation on both Earth and Selvarra. Some people celebrated it, others questioned it. But Jake and Lyria didn't care about public opinion. They were focused on the future they were building together. The story jumped forward 5 years. The war with the Kragoth Empire had finally ended. The combined forces of Earth, Selvarra, and a dozen other allied worlds had pushed the enemy back, liberating conquered systems and forcing a surrender. Admiral Jake Mitchell commanded the joint fleet that won the final battle. Yes, Admiral. Jake had completed the trials, proving his worth through tests of combat, wisdom, and dedication to the Veltharan people. It hadn't been easy. He had nearly died twice. But with Lyria's support and his own determination, he had succeeded. The council had accepted him, and Veltharan law had been changed to allow him to serve in Earth's military, while also holding a position of honor in Veltharan society. Now, standing on the bridge of his flagship as it entered Selvarra's orbit, Jake looked at the planet he had saved twice and now called home. The